Well, hi everybody. Welcome from him on that stool and me in the studio. Hope you're well. Welcome to Paul Archer's Mortgage Insights. We kind of renamed it really for the new podcast that we've got working alongside this particular live stream. But we'll still do it Monday mornings around about midday or thereabouts. Hope you're well. Let's go online, shall we, or on air as they say. Hope all is good with you. We have a beautiful weekend this weekend here in the UK. The weather was stunning, actually, really was lovely, which was great because a bit of sunshine just does you a lot of good, doesn't it, after a winter of darkness, as they say. And also the mortgage market and the financial services market is beginning to see some green shoots and all good things are happening for us. Anyway, got kind of big topic for you today on the probate process. Thought I'd update it for you because there's been a few changes in the last couple of years and people are not quite sure about the probate process and how it all works. So I just want to take a look at that with you later. But hey, we headed out yesterday, Shelley. I went for a nice long walk. We live in the Cotswolds, or Cheltenham, as you know, and we're 20 minutes in the Cotswolds. And this particular little couple of minutes from me now, just to kick things off, is what I call remember to look up to see the big picture. That's the title of my first kind of session for you today. And yesterday we went to Laurie Lee country. If anyone knows the author, of course, Cider with Rosie, fantastic book. And it's all about the Slad Valley in Stroud. And we had a beautiful walk. We did about 9 miles, actually. I'm preparing for in a month's time, I'm off to France to walk the Western Front Way, the Path of Peace. So I'm going to do about 100 miles on that one to start with. But anyway, got to get into practice. So we took some photographs. I'll show you some photographs first of all for you. So let's share with you some photographs of the scene. There's me doing my thing. So let's bring me into the scene as well, so you can see both. So yeah, let's put us both in there. There's me. So as you can see, it's a beautiful valley, and there's Shelley as well, looking great, and everyone's happy with the sunshine, and all is good. But the problem we had is the map. Now, I'm quite happy with maps, and as you can see, there's a photograph of the Ordnance Survey map. Now, that's a screenshot of the app, which I use. I use a phone now, an Ordnance Survey phone map. You subscribe to it, and you get to be able to walk around using your phone, as opposed to the paper. But the great thing about the phone map is it gives you like a GPS signal, so you can see exactly where you are, which is great if it's like a normal walk. But this one was really complex. To zoom in for you so you can see, this is part of the Slad Valley, and we were walking along the stream there. It was quite easy, but when we got here, boy, did it get really confusing, because it's like the spaghetti junction of footpaths around there. And we were all over the place. And the problem I had is because the sun was shining and I was looking at the phone, and it's difficult to look at the phone when the sun's shining because it like glares at you. So I was like this, like all the way. We were walking like this. I said, hold on, we got to turn left here. Now we got to turn right. Let's go round here and all sorts of things. And at one point, Shelley said to me, she said, stop. She said, Paul, you're not enjoying the view. You're not enjoying the sunshine and the valley, because it was absolutely beautiful. I mean, who could mirror that in the Cider with Rosie, Slad Valley? And that's the point, you see, because in business, as a mortgage broker, as a financial advisor, whatever is your role, then sometimes we get bogged down with looking down all the time. We're down in the trenches. We're trying to get busy. We're trying to contact clients. We're trying to drum up some business. We're worrying about getting it wrong and not having any business because the market's we're looking down all the time and worrying, etc. As I was doing with the maps. And Shelley said, look up, just enjoy what you've got. And that's the message, really. Occasionally look up beyond the detail so you can see the big picture. You can see the vision that you set yourself a few years ago when you became a mortgage advisor. Why do you do what you do? The bigger picture, the strategic stuff, which often is much more motivational than down in the trenches. So that's the message, really, and we had a great time, as you can see from the picture. It's gorgeous, isn't it? Absolutely beautiful. Can't beat that. The only problem was that the footpath or the path that we took, because the Ordnance Survey map people, they give you like recommended routes other people have done, so you follow their routes. You see, it took us around the village of Slad. And Laurie Lee, the author's famous or favourite bolt hole was this thing called the wall pack in, and we missed it. We'd actually diverted around it, so never got to the wall pack in, which is a bit of a shame, but such is life, and you have to get used to such things, don't you? Anyway, enough of that. Let's get into something a little bit more serious, because what I want to do now is talk about the UK probate process. And we're going to go over to the whiteboard for this, because I want to give you a good sort of 15 minutes or so of really good updates for you. This is great CPD. For those of you doing your CMAP, of course, this is right in the territory of CMAP 1 and CMAP 2, particularly when you look at protection advice. If you're an advisor, mortgage advisor giving protection, you need to take on board some of these things I'm going to share with you now, because it's going to help you to sell protection. Because I often used to, as a mortgage advisor myself, I used to find it very difficult to sell protection to single people buying a house on their own. Single guy, single girl. You talk about protection, and they just push back, say, "Well, there's nobody there it's only my mum." And when you're young, which I was as a mortgage advisor, you kind of just let it go. But I want to give you a couple of angles on that you might want to think about. So let's head over to the whiteboard, shall we? And see how we get on with that. Hope you're well, by the way. Hope all's good. Hope everything's tickety-boo with you. So let's pile across to the whiteboard, where I've already prepared my title, the UK probate process. I talk about the UK because we're talking about England, Wales, and Scotland, Northern Ireland, of course, the whole, all of the small countries which make up the UK, and therefore they've all got their own rules. So we'll have a quick look at those as well. In the textbook, if you're learning CMAP, it's mostly England, Wales law. Don't know why, but it just is. But of course, Scots law is just as important. So let's get into a few questions around the probate process. First of all, then, what happens when somebody dies? So let's get a few pictures going, shall we? Because I fancy a few pictures to excite you today. So let's put somebody who's died. There you go. So this person's died. So let's not beat about the bush, shall we? There we go. This person's now dead. And that's your mortgage client. And that's the point, you see, what happens when they die? Well, when somebody dies, of course, it's tragic. There's no doubt about that at all. But there's always something left behind, and there's always people behind you who, because you're dead, of course, who have to tidy things up. And that's where it gets a bit messy, because single people, they have to rely on their next of kin, which tends to be their parents, to tidy things up. And that's the issue, see, because you've got this estate which needs to be dealt with. And we often talk about an estate, don't we? So let's put the estate up here for you, because this person died, by the way, and this person has an estate. Now, the estate is a legal word that we use. It's not a car. You can still call cars estate cars. They're called 4x4s now, aren't they? But an estate is what you're worth. It's your values. It's your valuables. It's what money you have. It's what cash you have. It's what assets you have. And people's estates consists of houses. There's your house, for example. There might be some cash in the bank. There might be a car. These things all make up somebody's estate. There could be debts, of course, the mortgage, that's an estate. Just because it ain't worth nothing, it's still part of your estate. And the whole point behind dying, what happens when you die, is that your estate has to go somewhere. And eventually, get a different color pen here, eventually it's going to go over here to your beneficiaries. There you go. Now these people, I'll put a little smiley face on them, because they're quite happy to get a few bob, aren't they? I've never received a penny, by the way, but some people do. Thing about the single person, they've got a house, yes, got that. But they've also got a jolly big mortgage normally, and when they die, that mortgage has to be paid and serviced and dealt with by the parents. So what that person there is doing is leaving a mortgage to the parents, and nobody wants to leave a debt to the parents, do they? So a little bit of life insurance will sort that out, but come on to that later for you. So what is probate next then? What is probate? Well, probate is the legal process of administering this estate to take it to the beneficiaries. There's two parts to probate. The first part to probate is to apply for the grant itself, to apply for the grant of probate. So what you have to do, you have to apply for this thing called the grant of probate. There you go. So we'll give that a sort of a formal document look to it, shall we? That's your grant of probate. Now, once you've applied for your grant of probate, step 2 is to settle all the debts and give away all the money. So the grant of probate gives you permission. So step 1 is to get the grant, which gives you permission to administer the estate, to deal with it, pay off the mortgage, fix the car, whatever. It still means administering. And the second part then is you then have the permission to distribute the cash to the beneficiaries. So everything has to be liquidated, you see. A house needs to be sold, shares need to be sold, etc. And looked after. Houses just don't look after themselves. So the people who are applying for the grant of probate will have to administer the house, keep it clean and tidy, etc., get it sold. And again, would a single person want their mum and dad to do that? Do they want the hassle of that? So that's the thing. So that's the probate process. So who can apply then for the probate process? Who's involved here then? Well, the people that apply for this are known as executors or administrators. And the key question is, has a will been made? So who can apply? Well, first of all, has a will been made? That's an important one. So let's just put the will in here for you. Put a little documentation there. Wills are normally several pages long, isn't it? Has a will been made? Now, if a will has been made, or written, I should say, the will appoints the executor, an executor, or executrix. I think that's correct now. Actually, we don't have male, female names anymore for things, do we? But the executors are people, or your lawyer maybe, but usually somebody close to you. We often call them the personal representatives. They use that a lot in the book. And it's the executor's job to apply for the grant of probate. So that person will apply for the grant of probate. As I mentioned to you, that can be your loved one, or it can be a lawyer, of course, if you want to pay a few bob to a lawyer firm to do it, which is lots of rich people do that, don't they? That's perfectly acceptable to do that. Now, if you haven't got a will, if there is no will, so let's just put that here then for you. If there's no will, put a little cross through that one. And we're going to come on to that in a second, what happens. That's quite important. If there's no will, then somebody has to come along, usually a volunteer who's interested, usually the person that's probably going to get the money, who has to volunteer. These are known as personal representatives as well. And they have to apply to the probate office, but they apply for a different documentation called a letter of administration. And that then gives them the right to distribute the money. But because there's no will, you see, there's nobody telling you what's happening, where the money's going. You have to rely on the law of intestacy, which we'll come on to in a second. So when is probate not needed is the next question. When don't you need probate? Well, as you can see, you've got this person dying, they've got an estate, they apply for grant of probate, executor, etc. Gets distributed to beneficiaries eventually. Now, there are one or two exceptions where no probate process is needed. The first one, as far as we're concerned in mortgage world, are jointly held assets, what we call joint tenancy. If a property is owned jointly, what we call joint tenancy, if you remember that one, it means that on death of one person, the other person inherits it automatically. There's no will, there's no probate process. They just get it straight away. So that's one exception. The second one is small amounts, cash. If it's all in cash, a few chattels, which are bits and bobs that somebody's got around the house, maybe the car outside the front. If it's just cash, no shares or investments or property, then that normally can go to whoever wants to claim it, really. The third one are small amounts. Now, under the law, banks, building societies who hold investments for the deceased can let somebody have the money on production of a death certificate and a few other bits and pieces of identification. And this small amount ranges from $5,000, and some banks even work with $50,000. So it's quite a lot of money, actually. It's quite not a small amount, is it? But this is just as for exception to the rule, and it allows banks to liquidate savings and pay it out. We often used to have this at the bank. When I worked in the building society years ago, we often used to get, I can't remember what the limit was then, but we used to get a letter from a lawyer saying, no, please, can we have the money, etc. We used to close the account and send it over to them as well. And it's to pay for funeral costs, etc. Because when somebody dies, it costs a fortune, of course, to bury them or cremate them. And the government, in their bereavement support payment, don't pay a lot. Was it $3,500 or something? So often this money is required for that process. Okay. The fourth one is life assurance in trust, but I'll come on to that in a second. Life assurance in trust avoids this process as well. So there's four situations where you don't need it. How long is the process? Well, that's the problem. How long does it take? Well, it can take, if it's a quickie, if there's not a lot of things going on, there no property to sell, there's no shares to share. If it's just a bit of cash, whatever, it can take sort of 6 weeks or so. It's pretty quick if you want it to be, but it can also take several years before any beneficiary gets any of the money, and that's the problem you see with life assurance. Particularly if you don't put it into trust, it gets caught up in this process and can take months, years to get to the right person, and that's not right, of course, in the great scheme of things. So what is the process? And let's just highlight the process for you. We'll put the process down here so you can see it. There's 8 steps to the process. Step 1 is to find the will. Let's just put that down there for you. To find the will, if you can see that one, that's step number 1. Now, that actually might not seem bit that daft, really, because people have wills and they create wills, they write wills, but they just put them away somewhere. They just store them away safely. Remember, if somebody's rooting around for your will, it means you're dead. So they got to find the will. It's the first thing. You then apply online, like a lot of these things. You can go via your lawyer, of course you can, if you've got a complicated one. You see them on the movies, don't you, where people are inheriting vast fortunes and the lawyer calls them in for a reading. But now most people just go online and apply for it because it's pretty straightforward and simple. You then got to pay a fee. Now, the fee varies now according to the size of the estate. Don't worry about the numbers. Don't get tested on that. But, it's not cheap anymore. And fair enough, because you've got people to pay for, isn't it? You then have to pay your inheritance tax. It's an important one, this one, your IHT. I call this the on-account payment. Remember, with income tax for self-employed people, they pay on-account income tax, don't they, before the bill's worked out. If you remember rightly, they pay a half instalment in January and July, and then the whole thing's worked out the following January. Same thing with this as well. They'll ask you for an on-account payment for IHT, upfront wedge, which is a bit difficult if you haven't got the money. They then settle it later, and you may have to pay a little bit more at the end of it. Then your grant of probate is issued. So the grant of probate is then issued. Let's just sneak that in there for you. There we go. Or letter of administration if there's no will, and it's the administrators applying for the process as well. That's the other thing. So letters issued. So let's put that in there for you. Letters issued. Letters of administration. Now, once the letter of administration is issued, you then have to administer the estate and repay debts. Repay your debts. That's, of course, the mortgage that you've arranged for the single person would need to be repaid. And then once everything's settled, and it's then liquidated and distributed. So you then liquidate. Love that phrase, don't you? Liquidate the assets and then distribute it according to the will. Now that is the process, which is fairly straightforward, really. Need to know that one. A couple other quick things for you before we wrap up this session. Important session this, by the way. Lots of implications, and I'm going to come on to 4 main implications for you as mortgage advisors in a second or two. But what are you going to be aware of, though, is that the will is fine. You make a will and decide who it's going to. It's where there's no will is the thing I want to talk about now. Where there's no will, as we said before, the whole process money needs to go to the beneficiaries. That's the whole point. But who decides that? The law decides that, what they call the law of intestacy. Decides, excuse me, who gets what if there's no will. And you often get questions in exams on this one. If you're doing CPD, it's a useful thing to get. You should get kind of like a chart showing what's what. The Gazette has a really good one online. You can always get a little chart saying who gets what. Just want to show you briefly who gets what, just so you're comfortable with that. So what I want to do now is just head over to a slide so you can see this. Here we go. Let's put it all up there so you can see it all. Now this one here is rather colourful documentation which shares with you who gets what in England and Wales. And I need to zoom in, of course, for you so you can see this. The first question, again, this is useful for the exam. You ask, is the person married or in a civil partnership? that's obviously a question to ask. If they are married or in a civil partnership, and by the way, common law partnerships don't count here, they are single, then yes. So we go across to that side, yes. The big question then is your estate worth more than £270,000? Is the first one. If it's not, then everything goes to your spouse or civil partner. So that's the big question. If, however, your estate is worth more than 270, yes. Do you have children, grandchildren, or other descendants? No. Everything passes to your spouse or civil partner. So if it's just you and one other, and you die, and you haven't got any children or grandchildren or any direct descendants, we're talking about children, grandchildren, that sort of thing, not cousins and stuff like that, then your spouse, civil partner gets the lot. If you have children, grandchildren, then they will want to have some of this money. And then it starts to get highly complicated, as you can see, because we start now dividing it up. And in a nutshell, your spouse gets 270, and then they get half of the rest, half of the remainder. The other half is then given to the children, divided equally, and they get that money themselves. If they're too young, they just get the income, and then it's kept into trust. And then obviously they inherit it later. So that 270 is quite important. That's quite a useful one to know. Now, the one that always makes people chuckle is if there's no civil partner or spouse. So we go across to no. Then it starts getting divided up. First of all, if you have children, yes, well, everything's shared between your children. That makes sense, doesn't it? There's a little caveat about the child dying intestate. Don't worry about that. If you don't have children, if you have parents, then they get it all. And this is your single lady then buying a house on her own, for example, with a single mortgage. Her parents will, unless she's got children, of course, her parents will inherit the assets, but they probably won't have much because there's a mortgage to pay off as well, isn't that? Which is the thing. If there are no parents, it then goes to brothers and sisters, as you can see there, siblings. Then half brothers, half sisters, interestingly, if there's no brothers. Then it has to go right down the pecking order. Then the grandparents get their share, then the aunts and uncles, and then half aunts and half uncles. And if you haven't got anybody, of course, it then goes to the crown, which a lot of people get surprised about, actually, to the crown, which, of course, is Her Majesty's Treasury. And that is England. Well, so a couple of points to remember. Children of the deceased include legally adopted sons and daughters, but not stepchildren. There we are. And cohabitants do not count. Common law is irrelevant with this respect. There's no thing as common law, actually. So there is an advantage in being married. That's England and Wales. In Scotland, it's different. Of course, in Scotland, it's different, as you can see here. They have a similar thing. Are you married or civil partner? Yes. Do you have children or grandchildren? Yes. Well, as you can see, their numbers are just different. So they've gone for 473, and then they got little bits and pieces given to people, a third, 50,000 cash. Have you had questions on the Scots law in this one? I haven't seen many, if any, actually, but you might want to remember the 473 figure might help you if you're doing the exam. If there aren't any children, then that actually goes to the parents as well. Look, the parents then get a little bit as well. But across there, if you're not married, again, similar thing, children first, everything's shared, children. If there are no children, then parents. If there's no parents, it's brothers or sisters. Then it goes down to all the others. As you can see, brothers and sisters there, aunts, uncles, grandparents, and then it goes to the crown. So, of course, they're still part of the crown. So that's Scotland law. Do you need to remember the Scotland? Yes, it'd be useful. It's not in the textbooks. You don't really need to worry too much about that. But essentially, you're talking here about the law of intestacy, which determines, of course, who gets what, which is key. There's a lot of stuff going on in this one, isn't it? Hey, anyway, that's the technical stuff. Here's the 4 sales ideas to help you, advisory ideas. These are tips and things to help you to advise better, maybe, than you are. That's why we learn this stuff, by the way, not just to pass CMAT. We learn this to be a better mortgage advisor. Number 1, single people buying a property. They tell you they don't have anybody to worry about, therefore they don't need life assurance. But of course, they're putting a lot of responsibility on somebody to do all this tying up, usually a parent. Does this single person want their parent to be bothered, inconvenienced by administering an estate, selling a property, paying off a mortgage? It's just complete hassle for them. I mean, somebody's got to do it, of course they have, but Ideally, what would happen though is if they were to take out a single life assurance, which is cheap as anything for a single person, put the parents in trust, and you can change that later if they meet somebody, of course you can, so that when the person dies, the life assurance kicks straight in, goes straight to the parent, in cash. The parent can then pay off the mortgage quickly, get that all sorted, and get the house sold quickly, and get the whole thing wrapped up. I think that's useful for a couple of quid. That's definitely a benefit to think about. That's number one. Number two, joint customers, joint clients, joint borrowers, joint mortgagors, as we like to call them. The big question: tenants in common or joint tenancy? Now, I know the lawyer will talk about this. They need to own the property jointly. If it's joint tenant, it means that if either dies, the house goes to the other person. And for married couples, settled couples, that tends to be the right choice to make. If you go tenants in common, it means, of course, that whoever dies, their share of their property will go into their estate, and that will then get inherited by somebody in the same process. So make sure you do your life assurance correctly. Make sure you put single policies on each person in trust, so you don't have all this palaver, because half the property goes into the estate and then gets inherited by a parent, maybe because they haven't made a will. And remember, common law don't count. So the house has to get sold, and the person's still living it. It's a right old mess. So make sure that you get some life assurance in that respect. It's not expensive, and you should do this. Understanding this helps you, though. Point number three. Now, you may not be involved in pension pots and things, but be aware that money in a pension pot before it's been taken, and money, of course, in life assurance, is already in a trust. It's called a discretionary trust. A pension pot is already in a trust, and somebody's been nominated. So pension money will go to somebody else automatically. Likewise, your life assurance that you take out, you have to put that into trust. It should be done on the same basis. So you can't give advice on pensions, but you can talk about them. There's nothing wrong with that at all if you start getting into that topic. And the last point for you is wills. You should ask the question. If the client doesn't have a will, then refer them to somebody. You get a bit of commission for them to write the will. You do it online now on video. It's not a difficult thing to do. It's the right thing to do, because you don't want this intestacy business. It's just wrong on all levels. So make sure you get a will. The last thing about the will is that the will person, the expert, will offer a service where the wills are secured. They're looked after. They're put away somewhere safe. And when you die, you can easily get the will. Anybody can get the will. That's the whole point of security service. Because bear in mind that most people, if it costs like £100 a year, most people think, I can't be bothered with that. I'll put it in the top drawer. Everyone's got top drawers everywhere. Like, probably in this house, we've probably got about 1 million top drawers. Because if somebody's rooting around for your will, it generally means you're dead. There's no other reason why you're going to be rooting around for your will, or somebody's going to be rooting around. If they can't find it, then of course it's the same thing as having no will. So bear that in mind. So those 4 things you should be doing as a financial advisor, mortgage advisor. It's actually your moral duty to do those things. So there we are. That's UK probate process. Hope that's been useful. Bye. Anyway, let's head back over here, shall we, and say our fond farewells, as they say here. Enjoy the lunchtime live stream today, our mortgage insights. Hope it's been useful. Hope it's been a good update for you. That's what we intend to do most of the time, keep you updated on what's happening. Next week, I won't be here. So Monday, I'm in France seeing my dad. So I'm popping across to France to see my dad, who's 85, 86 now. So it'll be good to see him again, just for a weekend. We'll come back on Monday. And we'll be here the following week for you for our live stream. So enjoy the week, enjoy the mortgage market. It's picking up, actually. It's green shoots, things beginning to happen again. So keep positive about the whole thing. Other than that, have fun, everybody, and we'll see you next week. So bye for now. I'll tell you a bit more about my Path of Peace coming up in a month's time. Walking about 100 miles of the Western Front Way. So talk about it next time. Anyway, see you soon.